The NFL season, for the most part, only lasts about 4 months. And if you want to include the Super Bowl, you could say it lasts for 5 months. But between the span of those 5 months, during the 7 months where football is not being played, a large majority of that time is spent marketing the NFL draft. For months and months on end, between SportsCenter segments and when you're researching football-based articles, obviously free agency and contract negotiations aside, the number one storyline that typically pops up is who are the top college players, who are the top steals, and what we could expect from them once they get to the NFL. And there are times where we are absolutely excited at the concept and the prospect of some of these players. There's been Heisman Trophy winners that are making the transition into the NFL. There's teams that are taking crazy risks on some of these players. But for the most part, and for lack of a better way of saying it, the NFL draft is more or less a huge, overly marketed lottery where if you pick the correct prospect, you could hit really, really big, or you could potentially set your franchise back for years. And all you have to base your decision off of is how the player played against lesser competition in the college ranks in a system that could be significantly different from yours, in a game that's mildly different from yours, and a couple of workouts during the overly hyped up NFL draft combine. And no matter who you pick, all of your fans are going to play Captain Hindsight and tell you that you should have picked somebody else. But there are times where a team makes the absolute correct pick, and they pick one of the most generational talents that we've ever seen, a player that we have never seen before that has all the tools to succeed if they were selected to the correct team and placed in the right system. And the most clear-cut example of this, in my opinion, would be a player like Patrick Mahomes. I wholeheartedly believe that if the Cleveland Browns drafted Patrick Mahomes, his career probably would have been over by now. I feel like whoever the head coach would have been, or the multiple head coaches would have been, that got their hands on Patrick, they just wouldn't know what to do with him. And the fact that the organization in of itself is completely unstable would probably lead to the demise of possibly one of the greatest NFL talents we've ever had the pleasure of seeing. But fortunately for us and for Kansas City Chiefs fans, the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid, an offensive genius, got their hands on Patrick Mahomes, put him in an offensive system to succeed, and literally ask him who he thinks they should draft in the middle of the NFL draft. Congratulations, Clyde. But there are other absolutely generational talents that are not nearly as lucky, and this video is going to be somewhat of a tribute to them. Now, before we get to the content, guys, if there's any particular story that you really enjoy more than others, just like my NFL players who died in the middle of their primes and my NFL players with gang ties video, you're more than welcome to comment in the comment section and tell me that you want a dedicated video to any of these players. And furthermore, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and turn on my notifications to help the channel grow. I live stream on Twitch on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 9 p.m. Pacific time, and I'm also doing a Madden giveaway on my Twitter account. Finally, I just started a podcast. It's called The 2 Mike Show. A link to that's going to be in the description down below as well. Now that we got all of that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. Let's start with the first player that actually has a lot of sentimental value to me because he's one of the first players I followed as a kid who had his career completely decimated as a result of mismanagement, and that is Matt Leinart. If Matt Leinart declared for the 2005 NFL draft, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that the Heisman Trophy winner would have probably been the #1 overall pick. This is a player that had absolutely everything you would want in a quarterback. He had the size at 6'5", he had fairly nice accuracy, and he came from a pro-style offense. Furthermore, he was a fairly good-looking dude and seemed to be very, very marketable. So when the Arizona Cardinals saw him at the 10th overall spot when he declared for the NFL draft a year later, they couldn't help but draft him. But that's where things began to go downhill for Matt Leinart. You see, Matt hoped to be the franchise quarterback of the future for the Cardinals, and he threw for 2,547 yards in 12 games when he played as a rookie. But he had a fairly inconsistent second season, and as a result, Ken Wisenhunt would bench him in favor of Kurt Warner. In Matt's third year, Ken Whisenhunt indicated that he would probably be the starter even after signing Derek Anderson. Yet 3 games into the preseason, it was apparent that Derek Anderson was playing way better than Matt Leinart was, and Matt Leinart seemed content with a backup role as he had been with Kurt Warner. But even that wasn't enough. Ken Whisenhunt actually determined that Max Hall and John Skelton, who were rookies, were way better backups than Matt Leinart, and decided to cut Matt Leinart once and for all. Leinart would then sign as a backup with the Houston Texans for the 2010 season, where he would have a somewhat decent game for the Houston Texans before sustaining an injury. He would sign with the Oakland Raiders the year after, and his career would end prematurely in 2012. Now look, if you look at Matt Leinart's stats, you can make the argument that he was a horrible talent, he had a weak arm, and that he deserved not to start in the first place, but I really blame Ken Whisenhunt for opting to go with already developed veteran talent as opposed to actually taking the time to develop Matt Leinart. And when you look at Ken Whisenhunt's track record in terms of developing quarterback talent, it's never been really good. Ken Whisenhunt would have another opportunity with Marcus Mariota, and well, that season, I guess you could say Mariota did fairly well, but unfortunately, Ken Whisenhunt would go ahead and prove that he wasn't really the best at developing quarterback talent, as he would get a shot to coach Marcus Mariota a few years later. Speaking of players whose careers have been ruined by organizations, we can't complete this list without Marcus Mariota. And in the very beginning of his career, Mariota seemed to be the real deal, being drafted number 2 overall by the Tennessee Titans after winning a Heisman Trophy with Oregon. There is no player whose stock was higher, as there was rumors of the Philadelphia Eagles offering 4 first-round draft picks just to be able to draft Marcus Mariota. The Tennessee Titans turned that down, and in the beginning of his career, they seemed very smart for doing so. And there's nothing more evident of a team completely ruining a player's potential than if you look at Marcus's statistics, because in his rookie season, he threw 19 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, had a 62% completion percentage, even though Ken Whisenhunt was fired 7 games into his rookie season. Mike Mularkey would take over for the second half of Marcus Mariota's rookie season, and he would remain as the head coach through 2017. But throughout it all, Marcus Mariota would go through 4 different offensive coordinators within the first 5 seasons of his NFL career. And I guess after a while, there's only so many playbooks that you could study before it just wears you out, because in his 3rd NFL season, Mariota would go from throwing 26 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in his sophomore season to 13 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. And he regressed from there until Mike Vrabel finally decided this past season that Ryan Tannehill would be the better option moving forward. And there's nothing more blatantly obvious for why Marcus Mariota fell off than the fact that he had no coaching stability whatsoever. The Tennessee Titans were given a Lamborghini, a player that could scramble, a player that clearly had the capability to make plays, and absolutely crippled his confidence with the fact that they kept shuffling offensive coordinators and coaches. Thankfully, Mariota is 27 years old, and he's now the backup quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders, and John Gruden is a freaking offensive genius, so I'm hoping that he could get his career back on track. Up next, we have David Carr. No, not Derek Carr, his older brother, David Carr. David Carr had a phenomenal season at Fresno State, throwing for 4,800 passing yards, 46 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. He was known for having a cannon of an arm and was almost a Heisman Trophy winner. But unfortunately, he decided to declare for the NFL draft in the Houston Texans' inaugural year, which means with the number 1 overall pick, a team that was just put together with spare parts from other teams decided to draft David Carr. And, well, the result was absolutely disastrous. You see, David was sacked 249 times in his first 5 years in the NFL. When you get hit that many times, you're clearly going to lose some confidence, and you're going to be absolutely trigger happy and terrified to be in the pocket. David Carr would throw 60 touchdown passes in that span, but management would release him in 2006. And in hindsight, if I was the Houston Texans or any expansion team, I probably would have put in a backup quarterback in and maybe even tanked for the first season until there was a stable offensive line so they wouldn't completely cripple their golden child. But that's not what the Texans did. They opted to put David Carr in there immediately, and, well, the result was him being released in 2006. David Carr would then sign with the Carolina Panthers, but all the wear and tear really took a toll on his body. He would suffer a back injury in week 5 against the Saints and wasn't the same during the rest of the 2007 season. He would have short stints with the Giants and 49ers and then eventually retire in 2013. But thankfully, his brother Derek is having a significantly better career than him. Up next, we have Vince Young, and this list was created with Vince Young in mind, a player that came into the NFL on the heels of a 2006 national championship title. He was 30-2 as the Texas Longhorns starter and was expected to carry that dominance into the NFL. Young's time in Tennessee was controversial from the start, as the owner of the Titans wanted Vince Young as his franchise QB. Jeff Fisher, on the other hand, wanted Matt Leinart, and as a result, both careers ended up being ruined. Vince Young's career got off to a good start as he went 30-17 and was named to 2 Pro Bowls over his first 5 seasons in Tennessee. Young did all of this despite tensions between him and Jeff Fisher, and before the 2009 season, Fisher claimed Young would have to earn his job back from Kerry Collins. After a putrid 0-6 start to the 2009 season, Fisher only reinserted Vince Young because of pressure from Titans owner Bud Adams. In 2010, Young would suffer a thumb injury during a Week 11 game, and he wanted to re-enter the game, but Fisher wouldn't allow it. After an altercation in the post-game locker room, Young stormed out of the stadium and he was released in July of 2011. The worst part is, if you look at his statistics, he was improving tremendously from his first season in the NFL with 12 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, his second season in the NFL, which was horrible, 9 touchdowns to 17 interceptions, but in his final season for the Tennessee Titans, he threw for 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and would get released that season, and that was his best season. Now, obviously, we could blame Vince Young for his erratic behavior, but Jeff Fisher kind of has a track record for being a horrific head coach that had one fluke season where he made it to the Super Bowl and was able to ride the coattails of that season for the rest of his career. Up next, we have RG3, Robert Griffin III, who was one of the most electrifying draft prospects of the past decade, who actually showed us that promise in his rookie season. In RG3's rookie season, he set rookie records for passer rating and touchdown to interception ratio for the Washington Redskins in 2012. He was named the 2012 Offensive Rookie of the Year and even led the Redskins to a division title. Unfortunately, the Redskins' mismanagement of Griffin's health led to his eventual decline. He suffered a sprained LCL in his right knee in week 14 of his rookie season. Head coach Mike Shanahan went against doctor's orders and started RG3 in the Redskins' wildcard game against Seattle despite having Kirk Cousins as a backup. Griffin then re-injured his knee in the loss. Shanahan rushed Griffin back into his starting role for the 2013 season opener, even though RG3 hadn't played a preseason game. RG3 would then suffer an ankle injury in 2014 and finished the season with a 2-5 record. He was sacked 101 times in 37 games, which was a likely reason for his plethora of injuries. By 2014, RG3 was so traumatized that he refused to scramble and was doing his best to become a pocket passer. And unfortunately, he clashed with brand new head coach Jay Gruden, who thought Griffin would not fit into his West Coast offense. Griffin would then get released after missing the entire 2015 season with a concussion. He would sign with the Cleveland Browns in 2016, but was placed on injured reserve after a week 1 shoulder injury. RG3 is now the backup for the Baltimore Ravens. And I don't know if that should have been number 1 or if we should have included the number 1 overall pick in the 2012 NFL draft, Andrew Luck, because Andrew Luck was by far one of the most transcendent talents and probably one of the most surefire draft prospects that we have ever seen in NFL history. Throughout his entire career, Andrew Luck threw for 171 yards and 83 interceptions, completed 61% of his passes, and seemed to be getting better and better after every year. The problem was, the Indianapolis Colts didn't bother to protect their quarterback. Throughout his entire career, Andrew Luck got sacked 174 times in 6 seasons, and eventually this led to him sustaining a shoulder injury amongst a bunch of other injuries that completely wore him down, as the Indianapolis Colts would completely squander draft pick after draft pick and would not invest a single first-round pick in the offensive line until the 2016 season and the 2018 season, but by then it was already too late. the wear and tear on Andrew Luck's body was way too great, and he opted to retire in a year where the Indianapolis Colts were appearing to be an absolute dynasty, because the Indianapolis Colts were recently beginning to draft well after coming out of 2017 with players like Malik Hooker and Marlon Mack, and then the next season drafting Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard. It appeared as though the Indianapolis Colts not only had phenomenal talent, but they had cap space to add even more talent. It's very rare where a team drafts really well and at the same time has the cap space to sign even more players. And the Colts were clearly on the cusp of a dynasty, but by then the wear and tear on Andrew Luck was way too great, and a lot of Indianapolis Colts point the finger at Ryan Grigson for completely botching the earlier drafts in Andrew Luck's career. Luck is still 30 years old, so maybe in a year or two he will come back, but there's also a chance that his career might be gone for good. Let me know in the comment section down below, are there any other players whose careers were absolutely destroyed by these teams? If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and we could do a part 2. Aside from that, I'm your boy Microphone, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.